Amazon says that this is a winner. Here's the company's breakdown. It says Virginia is standing to receive some $3.2 billion in tax revenue over the next 20 years, with workers averaging over $150,000 a year. Virginia will give Amazon, it says, $573 million in breaks. $550 million of that, a cash grant. $23 million comes from the city of Arlington over 15 years for infrastructure projects and the like. And New York will get $10 billion in tax revenue over the next 2 decades, so says Amazon. Again, an average salary of more than $150,000. New York, it says, will give $1.525 billion in performance-based incentives. Now, that's a $1.2 billion refundable tax credit and a cash grant of $325 million for buildings being occupied over the next 10 years, so long as they hit those targets. Not everyone is thrilled with this, as they say there is much more beyond the numbers. David Dworkin is with the National Housing Conference. He is the CEO of that network, and he joins us here in studio. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Blake. Good to be here.
So when you talk about 25,000 jobs in each one of these major cities, each person getting at least $150,000 a year in salary, some would say, what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. It's great news for both communities. The trick is it needs to stay great news. And the problem that we have to deal with is that when you put that many people into a community at one time or over a short period of time, you're going to see housing prices go up, both for renters and for home buyers. And if Amazon's employees can't afford to buy and rent in this community, they're going to end up with the same problem they had in Seattle, and they don't want that either.
Deirdre just talked about that. I want to get to that in a second. 25,000 in each city. It's not like all 25,000 are suddenly going to emerge in both of these regions. Some will be from this area. How many do you expect in this greater Washington area and in New York City to suddenly show up there needing a place to live?
Well, it could be a lot, and it's also already having an impact on pricing. You're seeing condos that were on the market just a few weeks ago not getting much action being bid up today. And the same thing is going to be the case in a little longer time frame with rental properties. We want to make sure that the development doesn't lead to dislocation. We want people who live in these communities to be able to benefit from this new investment, too.
You bring up Seattle. Houses there have skyrocketed. This, speaking of Washington, D.C., has been one of the more stable markets. When it booms, it doesn't boom that much, and when it busts, it doesn't bust that much. This market right here, Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland, do you think we could potentially be Seattle Part 2 or 3, even if you bring New York into the equation?
Well, we will be if we do it wrong. And the name of the game is we need to be very thoughtful about how we do this development. We need to make sure that we have housing for all incomes, because it's all connected. When housing prices are too high to buy, people rent. If you've got more people renting, rents are going to go up. So they're all very interconnected. And, you know, in Seattle, you have enormously high housing prices. You also have, in the last 4 years, homelessness has doubled.
Last question for you. When you talk about Seattle or D.C. or New York City, in Northern Virginia, it's Northern Virginia, D.C., Maryland, and New York. You're talking about also potentially out east onto Long Island, out west into New Jersey. How far, when you talk about housing, does this actually span, even though the headquarters are going to be in a handful or dozen full worth of buildings?
Well, you know, when I bought my first house, I bought 20 miles outside of the city so that I could afford it. So I think it's going to be pretty far, and it's going to have an impact everywhere in the area.
David Dworkin, we will see what happens here. I guess this is day one of a long process moving forward.
It is indeed.
We'll see how it unfolds. Thanks, David. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.